Welcome, everyone, to another InsurTech Rising webinar. I'm Jeremy Smith, the COO of RiskGenius, and I'd like to welcome Patrice Scully, Manager of IBM Watson and Cloud Platform Expert at Delivery Services at IBM, as well as Neeraj Arora, the Global Head of Decision Science and Data Automation at AIG. Today, we're going to be discussing how to kickstart your AI strategy. But before we do, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to be live tweeting this webinar, so you can join the conversation using the hashtag InsurTechWebinar. You can see that up at the top of your screen or up at the top of the slide deck. Also, if you have any feedback on today's webinar or any recommendations for future webinars, there's going to be a short survey at the end of the webinar, so please stay on, and it'll be very short and quick, but all feedback is helpful. Also, a little bit of promotion today. For all listeners, there's going to be an exclusive discount to the upcoming InsurTech Rising Europe event in September. So use the discount code that you'll see on your screen at the end of the webinar, and you'll get a 10% off price. And InsurTech Rising is also going to send an email with this code over the next day or so. Last bit of housekeeping, and then we'll dive right into it. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them to us using the Ask a Question that's on the left of your screen, or by tweeting us at InsurTech Rising. That is also, our Twitter handle is also at the top of the screen. So with all that in mind, let's get started. By way of quick intros, Patrice, would you mind giving everyone a 30-second intro on yourself?
Sure, thanks, Jeremy. My name's Patrice Scully, and I'm part of the IBM Watson and Cloud Platform Expert and Delivery Services organization. So I manage a team that develops business solutions that allows clients to quickly prove the value of AI and Watson within their organization. You may remember Watson from the Jeopardy game about 6-7 years ago now. My team also provides consulting and implementation experience across the Watson organization. But during my career at IBM, I've had many years of IT experience with positions in sales, program and project management, business transformation, and product management. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending the webinar today.
Hey, thanks, Patrice. And Neeraj, a little bit on you.
Hi, my name is Neeraj Arora, and my team at AIG basically helps develop the right infrastructure for data-driven decision-making. And it spans everything from very foundational data access for the various parts of AIG to doing work in the advanced analytics to AI and natural language processing. So across the board, we believe that different parts of AIG are at different level of sophistication when it comes to the use of technology and analytics and AI. And our objective is to help each and every one of them, no matter where they are, go one step up. And that's the process we see ourselves involved in. More specifically, I work within the personal insurance area. So that's your standard home, auto, travel, warranty kind of business. And we are also getting into other areas of AIG as we explore new ways to help the organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Neeraj. And I am Jeremy Smith, Chief Operating Officer of RiskGenius. RiskGenius, we are an InsurTech who uses artificial intelligence to help carriers and brokers understand policy language better. We focus on an area that most don't, which is the words that are inside of a policy. And we're able to deploy our platform to let carriers get to those words and understand those words faster and better, and let brokers get the numbers inside of those forms as well as the words faster and better. So with that, a little bit of defining of terms before we dive into everything. We've been talking about, or we're going to be talking about kickstarting your AI strategy. So let's define artificial intelligence just very briefly, because people may have different definitions or different conceptions of it. There are really two broad categories of artificial intelligence, general AI and applied AI. General AI is the artificial intelligence that everybody sees in sci-fi shows. You know, the super intelligent, all-knowing android or software that can do or know anything. Doesn't really matter what you throw at it. That is still science fiction. That's still anywhere from decades to centuries away. The type of AI that is really emerging today and that we're going to be talking about today is applied AI. So this is artificial intelligence that is really applied to very specific tasks or verticals, whether it is insurance language or setting up scheduling events on your calendar. These are AIs who are being deployed to do a very specific thing. Yet, the reason we call it AI is because essentially it has a human-like ability to make decisions or recommendations. It is able to take human or very natural language-like input that also creates human-like output. It has the ability to learn and get better based on its successes and failures. But lastly, today's AI isn't really meant to replace humans. It's meant to augment humans and make them better because, again, it's not the science fiction AI, so it can't do everything we can do, but it can absolutely make us better at our jobs. So when we talk about an AI strategy today, that's really the artificial intelligence that we're referring to. So with that, Patrice, first question for you. What framework should carriers use when thinking about implementing artificial intelligence?
Thanks, Jeremy. And you know what, IBM clients ask us this question all the time. So we found that a three-step approach is effective in helping clients on their AI journey. And I do use the word journey because AI is not a once and done. It's really a journey that you learn, grow, and evolve. So the three steps IBM shares with clients are prove, adopt, and scale. And let me just briefly review these steps. So prove's the first step, and in this step you want to prove that AI computing can positively impact your business with an initial use case. You show that AI can add value, transform your business, and be impactful to your business, whether it's for internal or external clients. This is really the most important step because if you do this right, you can use it to accelerate AI in your organization. So again, that was prove. The next step is adopt. And in this step, you adopt an AI approach and understand how it will change your organization and ways of working. You do this by reviewing what you learned during Prove about how AI impacted your organization, your IT and business processes, roles, etc. So you look at all the changes you need to make as you take what you learned and apply it to your AI journey to make AI meaningful and impactful to your business. So that's adopt. And then finally, the last step is scale. And during this last phase, you'll really scale AI computing solutions and capabilities across your enterprise so it can transform your business, drive large amounts of business value, and positively impact your customers and bottom line. So again, the three steps are prove, adopt, and scale.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrice. I think that sets the table nicely. And so sort of sticking with that framework, prove. The prove stage. So, Neeraj, what would you say are the, two or three most important elements of the prove stage?
Sure. So, speaking from the perspective of an, internal team, within an organization which is working on AI and the journey of AI, as Patrice rightly calls it, I think our experience in the prove stage was the very first thing is for the team working on it, not the external stakeholders. When I say external, I still mean within the organization, is to believe in it. So, it's new. It has a lot of hype. You hear all kinds of things about AI. But the first step, I believe, in working in that journey is that you yourself, your team, has to believe in it. At the same time, we should not be forcing it. We might be getting exposed to problems which look like, hey, that will be an interesting thing to apply AI on. But before we start using that as a POC, we have to be very careful that, it is something that truly needs AI and cannot be done with something else which is simpler or less complicated or more open to adoption from the organization. Because people will see through it, if you try and force AI. And then the last thing I would say is that we have to be picking up something. So proving is all about picking up the right use case that you can initiate the change process or the mindset change process for the organization. So you want to pick something that is, I would say, relatively simple in terms of adoption. It doesn't have to be simple in terms of the work that you do analytically or to solve the technical issue. It will be helpful if it is, but it is really the adoption level ease that you have to keep in mind as you think about proving it. Now, bear in mind, I did not touch upon the value aspect, which is, of course, there. It has to make economic sense for the organization. And I personally believe that AI makes a lot of sense in lots of different areas. But when I was thinking about the proof stage, I wasn't hung up on maximizing the ROI from my POC. It was more about, hey, what can we get done that shows some results? And start that applause, that emotional acceptance, rather than focusing purely on very high NPVs.
Right. That makes total sense. Thanks, Neeraj. And one thing, just looping back to one of the items you mentioned, where big mistake that we often see at RiskGenius is people finding they find the solution first, and then they go looking for a problem in the organization to apply it against, and that's usually not a good approach. You want to find the problem first, and then go seeking the optimal solution. Which, Patrice, sort of leads me to you. Obviously you do this a lot. What's the biggest mistake that you see carriers make in the proof stage?
So I think a couple things here, and it kind of touches on what Neeraj has said, is pick a use case that adds value, right? It's like he said, get something that has some results. Don't pick something that's cool, hey, that would be really cool if we did AI here. But you pick something that does, that has an impact to your business, doesn't have to be big, but something that does have value, because you're really trying to prove the value of AI to your organization and then use that proof to accelerate AI within your company. A second key point, I think, is to get moving. So speed is key here. You don't want to plan and plan and plan, spending months planning, or I think as Neeraj alluded to, plan some, huge MVP, right, minimally valuable product. To just start with something. It's here, competitors are using it, and you're going to learn a lot. And the third point is don't be afraid to make mistakes in this phase. You're new to AI, you're going to be learning a lot, and we found clients can benefit tremendously from the lessons they learned in the first project and then accelerate the next phases by applying these lessons. And I know within IBM, one of the things we ended up doing, because we really wanted to help clients to get started, is we developed a couple solutions. We call them Watson Business Solutions, which are targeted solutions that address specific use cases. They're implemented in about 4 weeks using clients' data and clients' experts to show value. So, for example, one of them we have is called Expert Assist. It's designed to provide people with the information they need to do their jobs quickly instead of having to look for information from multiple sources or call center agents or maybe more experienced people. So, for example, in insurance, you might put that in front of, if you did Expert Assist, you could use it to have your financial advisors who are new be able to access information quickly instead of having to call senior people or others to get the answers, and allow them to really prepare for more meaningful conversations. So that's an example of a small use case. You could just do it for, a small group. But again, it's going to add value. People are going to see the value of it. You're going to learn a lot from it, and then you can accelerate it. So in summary, really pick a use case that's impactful to your business. Doesn't have to be huge. Get going, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because what you really want to do is learn, about AI, learn what you learn, improve, and then use it later on.
Perfect. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, particularly with the making mistakes, and that's a critical component. Is for the key stakeholders involved in implementing AI or really any solution, managing expectations, getting them to understand up front there will be failures along the way, and that's not just okay, it's good. It's a sign of progress and experimentation and something that's going to help us in the future. So setting those expectations ahead of time that failures will come about and that is okay is critical, which I think transitions nicely to the adopt stage. And once you've sort of proven the use case and that there can be a good use for AI, it's time to think about adoption. And so, Neeraj, question for you: who are the key stakeholders to involve when moving into the adopt stage?
So the answer to that is no different for AI as it would be for any other new thing that you're trying to implement. And I think of stakeholders in three categories. At the very top, what I call promoters are very senior people in the organization or senior leaders in the division, if you have a large division, who are making sure, and you have to make sure that they talk about AI in this case a couple of sentences in almost every speech they make where it is appropriate to do so. You want to make sure that the organization as a whole believes that the leadership is behind AI. The second stage, the second group of people here are the ones who make decisions within the business unit or the operational unit that you are trying to implement your AI in. And they need to be looked as not as stakeholders, but owners. So although, my team is doing the work in terms of developing the AI, we are not the owners. The owners are the people who will actually implement it and will own it going forward in terms of its continuous usage. And they are the ones who need to feel that it's their project a lot more than we feel, or you feel if you are running the AI program that it's yours. So they are the ones who need to completely own it, feel responsible, feel the rewards and the appreciation all about that. And then the last group are the implementers. These are the people either in the front line or the people in IT or whoever else who's actually implementing, or the group of people whose work will be supported by AI. And you want to pick the most vocal opponent if you have one, or you need to pick the most popular person in that group and bring them to your side. They need to become your ambassadors. Because if at that level you don't have the right level of support, then implementation is going to be really hard. Now, beyond these three groups, of course, every organization has its sets of decision-making rules and who needs to get involved. So they need to be, considered stakeholders, absolutely. But my recommendation would be to not go too wide in creating a large stakeholder group, because that makes the creation of a minimum viable product difficult. Because everybody would have an input, and suddenly your MVP is no longer an MVP, and it balloons up. So keep your stakeholder group to the minimum, but make sure you have your promoters, you have your owners, and you have your ambassadors in them.
Yeah, perfect. And it's interesting talking about having all the right stakeholders there, but at the same time keeping it smaller and more manageable, so that you can be more agile in your approach. Which I guess, Patrice, that gives me a question for you, which is, can you talk about, again, having done this a lot, talk about the importance of taking an agile approach to adoption?
Sure, thanks. So with Adopt, you're looking at what do I need to do to adopt an agile approach and understand how AI will change your organization and ways of working. You need to work in an agile manner here. For example, business and IT should work as one. With AI, you can now access data you may not have had the ability to access before, right? Because AI allows you to get into data, look at documents, etc., and look for answers. So suddenly you may have to ask yourself, well, who owns the data? How do I access it? Who uses it and manages it? So there may be new relationships that need to be formed. You're going to train Watson or whatever AI technology you're using to answer specific business questions. So you need to involve business experts in your company. You need to understand who your customer is and how they talk or actually ask questions so you can design an AI system for them. And really, IT can't do this alone. So you want to really work in an agile manner across your organization. They said AI may lead to new relationships between different parts of your organization. So take the lessons you learned in Prove and apply them to Adopt. So if in Prove you access data for the first time and you found who owned it, you're going to continue to involve them in Adopt. So it's very important to be very agile and work different lines if you need to, different ways that you've done in the past to make it successful.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Neeraj, just looking back to something that you said a little bit earlier about AI and the stakeholders and adopting it relative to other technologies. What would you say is unique about adopting AI versus adopting other technologies?
So I think the one big difference in my mind between AI and other technology is the emotion it invokes. And that comes in two areas. First is fear. AI, because of the talk about, in the future, AI replacing a lot of work that humans do, in the talk about universal basic income that people are talking about in context of AI, it does invoke a lot of fear. There's robotic process automation, which isn't exactly AI, but, people tend to think of the two together. So there is fear of what AI will do. And at the same time, it is also the very same thing looked at from the other angle. It's the promise of AI. Look what AI can do. So this extreme emotion that it might invoke in the people, and it might change from people to people, it might change within the same person from week to week, is the one thing which is very different compared to all the other technologies that we have tried to implement within AIG. And I think the way to manage that is a lot more about helping people understand, what you said, Jeremy, earlier on, that it's not about replacing people, it's about enabling them to do more value-added work. So AI would help, focus immediately onto the things they need to be focused on. It is taking away some of the mundane tasks and allowing people to really do the things which are far more important and far more worth of their time. And in that sense, AI is an extreme case of a really, really efficient executive assistant. And that's what people have to understand. And that is one of the most difficult tasks that we have when we come in and try and talk about AI or try and figuring out the right kind of projects for AI.
Right, and it makes total sense. Yeah, it's important to remember this is not a godlike software that is both going to replace everyone or solve every problem. So yeah, that makes total sense. People sort of putting that expectation, positive or negative, on AI versus other technologies. So, Patrice, what would you say, at the adopt stage? You talk about the biggest mistake carriers could make at the prove stage. What would you say are the biggest mistakes carriers make at the adopt stage?
Okay, I would say one of the biggest mistakes they might make is to not understand you need to involve both your experts and actual end users as part of the AI strategy when you develop those solutions. So if you're setting up an AI solution, for example, to help provide expertise to your clients, whether those are internal or external clients, you need to understand how the client asks questions. What's the language they use? With AI, you can ask things in natural language, but how do they actually ask the questions? What data do they need? What do they expect from a system? So you really want to involve them in design and testing and get the system in front of them as early as possible. And if you remember, I said up front, go quickly, because then you can achieve maximum benefits. So you want to ensure the AI solution meets their needs and manner in a way they understand. And when you adopt the AI strategy in your organization, you should consider this. Another thing is it may lead to new roles. It's certainly a new technology. You're accessing data you didn't have before, so you may need new roles, for example, to manage the data or help your AI solution. And you want to be open to that. And going back to what Neeraj just said about the emotion or the fear, is AI replacing me? I know some of our clients that have used AI solutions kind of as a front end to their call centers. They may be looking to decrease the number of calls that go to the call centers, whether they're internal or external call centers. to drive down the volume there by putting expertise in front of the users. What they have found is that now the folks in the call center are getting really much more detailed questions to handle, ones that are more difficult, and they're not doing the mundane ones. They've also found that sometimes because they have more focus on data and maybe have some new data roles, one of our clients took some of those call center people and moved them into new roles in data, and then the call center people actually felt like, this is great. Now I have a role that they considered, more challenging. So when you adopt, look at everything. Don't be afraid to make changes, and don't be afraid of AI because it actually can lead to new roles, new positions, and really help your company evolve. So, work with people across your organization. Take the lessons you learned from Prove and apply them into Adopt.
Perfect. I think that's a great way to tie up the Adopt stage. So going to move into the final stage here in the last 5 to 10 minutes before we get to questions, the scale stage. But before we do, and speaking of questions, just to remind everybody that if you have any questions, don't forget that you can send them to us using the Ask a Question on the left-hand side of your screen, or tweeting at InsurTech Rising. So with that, scaling. Now that we've talked a bit about the first two elements, proving out the use case and that AI is a good solution for us, the best framework for adopting it in the early stages so that you can prove out what you had set to prove out. Now it's time to scale. AI looks like it's the real solution. It's time to roll this puppy out. Neeraj, what would you say are the 2 or 3 most important elements of scaling?
So let me begin by confessing that we are not really in a scaled state in any material way for AI. It's between the prove and the adopt, depending on the particular group that we are working with. We are in a very initial stages of scaling, I would say, for some, and here are the things that I've been noticing. So first of all, we are starting to see a virtuous cycle. So that is, we did a little bit of work. The group, the people involved, the stakeholders involved were happy with it, and they have started asking for us to explore more and more opportunities. And seeing them do it, other groups have started to do the same. So I think that's the beginning of scaling from one perspective, at least in terms of the change management and the acceptability of the solutions that we are providing using AI. The second thing I would say that, as I think about scaling, it's not about perfection. It's okay to be an 80-20. We are not trying to be perfect in any of these solutions that we are trying to approach. And that kind of ties back to the fact that we are not trying to replace people. We are trying to maximize the benefit we can get from AI, so human beings are left to do the most important task, and we are not trying to replace a lot more of those important tasks. And third, we are not trying to do too much all at once. So each of our projects, even though some of them tie up in the long run to do a lot more than what the individual components might look like, we have made sure that we are talking in terms of really achievable small targets which are phased out but tie in with each other. So over the next 2 to 3 years, when those 7 or 8 different things are done, we will be in a much more different state than we are today. But right now, we are not saying that, hey, we are ready to scale. Let's keep that 3-year out target as our project goal, and let's start working on the large one. So in that respect, I think the way we are doing scaling is not doing a lot of stuff at once, but doing little things which are all going to add up to that scaled environment we want to be in.
Right. Makes total sense. And kind of continuing on the theme and stage of scaling, Patrice, when a company is preparing to scale, what sort of questions should they be asking themselves?
So I think there's a number of questions, and I kind of lumped them into a couple areas. So let's think about leadership and governance. So where is AI going to fit? And is it going to be a project, or some companies may want to develop a whole competency, for example, around AI? Who's your sponsor? Who should own and lead it? And, if you remember, Neeraj, a while ago talked about the guys at the top always talking about it, making it very important so people see it. So think of leadership and governance in that area. Then tools and technology. So what's the technology trying to do? How does it fit in your organization? What do I need to do to adopt the technology, to make it assist my adoption, et cetera? So what technology are you going to use? What tools? Another area which is also important is measurement and reporting. AI is different, so you need to ask yourself, should I measure and report AI success using traditional metrics like ROI, which of course is important and you should use that, but are there other metrics you should consider? If you remember, I talked about the call center where, you might look to drop calls to the call center, but what we also found was the calls that were going there were if I say the harder ones, the more detailed ones that took more to answer. So that was a great benefit because people with easy questions could get those answered using an AI system, and just the more complex one went into the call center. So you might want to measure something like that, and the benefit of being able to free up call center people for higher level questions. And then finally, the team and skills. With AI, you're going to need new skills. You're going to need new roles to manage data or to work with the AI solutions. You're going to have people with knowledge about AI. So what skills do you have to enable in your organization or competency? What methods should you use? What best practices? You may need to hire people outside your organization to bring on some of those skills, or, as I said, move current people into those new roles. And that's another way to skill. So, again, looking at, all kinds of questions kind of in the areas of like leadership, technology, measurement and reporting, and then teaming and skills. So if you look across all these areas, it will help you with your scaling to make sure you scale effectively.
Gotcha. Beautiful. Thanks, Patrice. And you can tell Patrice has done a lot of implementations and working with clients. She has a very structured way of thinking and laying things out. Neeraj, question for you. What are the biggest roadblocks that you run into when scaling a new technology? Obviously, it doesn't necessarily have to be AI, since, as you said, you haven't scaled that at this point. But just when scaling a new technology, what would you say the biggest roadblocks are?
So I think the biggest roadblocks are really around the change management aspect. In most cases, yes. There have been situations where we did not have the right kind of funding to put in the correct hardware infrastructure in place, etc. But those are eventually overcome. But it's a change management aspect where if we try to bring about that scaling purely on the base of logic, it doesn't always work. So focusing on, just the value to prove something, you have to do it, absolutely. But if you focus just on that, it is going to be really difficult. The other two aspects that we always have to be careful is about the emotional aspect. What are the users, the implementers, the stakeholders, what do they feel, not just what they think, what they feel about it, and how are you managing that? And I think even more important than these two is, have you made it easy for them to use and scale it? Because if it is difficult, so, understand it's something new. It's difficult mentally for them to do it. It's difficult for them to understand, for a lot of people to understand, and that's human, that, hey, we will be doing things differently from what we've always done. And on top of it, if you don't make it easy, then it almost becomes impossible to get through. So you gotta keep it simple, you gotta keep it easy, and therefore I always talk in terms of phasing things out and breaking things down into smaller bits that people can chew and bite, and that's the way, and that's what people forget most often, and they try to do something really big from the get-go, which I believe is the biggest roadblock towards success in any such area.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. And then last question, at least last question from me before we move into the audience Q&A. So with the last minute or so, Patrice, sort of polishing off the scaling element, what's the biggest mistake that carriers make when scaling?
I think probably say not looking broadly at like the 4 areas I mentioned, right? Asking a very broad set of questions. AI as a technology will continue to evolve. So as an organization implementing AI, you have to continue to learn and evolve as you scale across your organization. As Neeraj says, keep it simple, break it down. You don't have to have perfect answers to all the questions. Go ahead and scale and be flexible to change as you continue your AI journey. And, work with people to help them understand AI as a positive impact. As you said earlier, think of it as augmenting the intelligence of people. And I know our CEO likes to say AI is really augmented intelligence. So we're trying to do things to help us make better decisions or be able to work on more complex problems, and that's a good thing. So keep that in mind also when scaling.
Okay, perfect. So thank you both for all of that input in terms of proving, adopting, and scaling when it comes to an AI strategy. Let's look at some of the questions that we have from the audience. Neeraj, first one is for you. Obviously, you said you haven't scaled any artificial intelligence solution at AIG, but has AIG implemented AI sort of in any way, in any part of its organization yet? And if so, where and how is it used?
So I would say there are 3 broad areas in which we are currently, in the adopt stage for AI. The first one is using AI to go through hundreds and thousands of our policy and contract language documents and actually get a lot more information transferred from those big documents into a structured format for deeper analysis and figuring out, what is it that was promised and what needs to be delivered. Earlier, it used to be a very manual task. And now it's a lot more automated in some areas. Similarly, we had, one of the first things we actually did was to do the same thing for medical reports that we were getting for our life insurance business and using NLP to figure out where does a medical adjuster needs to focus on while going through the medical records of someone new who's coming in. We are also using it in our claims area. And in fact, in claims area, we saw an example where the applied AI had started to become, I would say, very tiny bit general AI. We trained it to figure out the cause of loss from, a plumbing perspective. And it actually helped us figure out misclassification in some of the other areas that went beyond water losses and even into cat areas. So that's one whole group. The second group is in telematics, and we are using it to figure out where the cell phone-based telematics information is not coming from driving a car, but is from the fact that you are either in a bus or in a train, and that has often been confusing to decipher. And we've very successfully used AI to separate the car trips from the bus and the train trips, even if we don't have the bus and the train maps. And lastly, we are in the POC stage of developing something in conjunction with Alexa. It's a warranty assistant, and both NLP and NLG are part of this exercise. It's actually happening outside my team, but definitely in AIG, where you could get your warranty thing fixed and figured out just by talking to Alexa.
Gotcha. Thank you, Neeraj. And something I just as a follow-up question here, or related question from a different webinar participant, which I'll ask in a sec. But I just realized AIG is already 2/3 on the way to AI. You have AIG. You're already 2/3 there from a better perspective.
I love that.
Good job positioning yourselves brand-wise. So just a follow-up question or a related question. At AIG, how much AI is used for policy pricing and analytics? What is the industry's response to adopt new data-driven pricing for policies?
So here is, where, again, the way you defined AI would come into the picture. So we do use highly advanced statistical techniques and GBM techniques, and we do use machine learning in order to improve our loss models, especially on a geospatial level, and when we are dealing with hundreds and thousands of variables, each with hundreds and thousands of different levels. I wouldn't strictly call it AI from the perspective of the discussion we were having. It's not really replacing human behavior in context of understanding a document or understanding routes or talking to one of our customers to have a better customer experience. But we absolutely use machine learning in our policy pricing and analytics, and it has been very successful, especially in areas where we don't have that much existing presence. So I believe one of the better uses of the new analytical techniques is where we don't have a large enough sample size, and it gives us tremendous improvement from the existing models that were built using more traditional techniques.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Another question, and I'll take a shot at this one, and then Patrice, throw it to you for additional thoughts. Question is, what is the framework for training a chatbot to be able to respond to users with personalized insurance recommendations? Is there an easier alternative to reinforcement learning with a live agent or human data set? How can the chatbot be made to surpass human underwriters? So just a couple of quick thoughts on my end, which is, one, there are very few shortcuts when it comes to AI, when it comes to machine learning or any form of machine learning, reinforcement learning in this case. And so honestly, a live agent is a good one. Anytime you're interacting or putting the chatbot with human beings, that's going to lead to the best results. But more so even than a live agent, if you can create a bit of a monitored playground where you deploy that chatbot, not necessarily broadly, but to a smaller scale of the public, so that every fifth person on your site sees the chatbot or what have you, but have a human being monitoring that response so that they can step in at any time. But the reason that I believe that is the best option is because you need to expose it to the unexpected, right? If you expose your chatbot to a very structured environment, structured for you, structured for the chatbot, you will never encounter the unknown unknowns, which is the key to really developing any sort of AI. So there's not really shortcuts there. They're just a way to mitigate risks. And I think by creating these sandboxes or these monitored playgrounds is the best way to do it. Also, one other quick thing, how can the chatbot be made to surpass human underwriters? I don't know that in our lifetimes we are going to see chatbots surpassing human underwriters. Again, I think it will take a lot of the lower level Q&A away, which will save a lot of time for the human underwriters or anyone who would be responding to questions, and provide more operational scale to carriers, because you can have the same amount of people handling more things, because the chatbot answers a lot of the FAQs essentially. But in terms of the chatbots surpassing human underwriters, I don't think that's something that's necessarily possible while we're all alive and breathing. Patrice, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on
No, I agree with you. I think, when you set a chatbot up, you want to definitely involve the end users, find out how they ask questions, the kinds of things they ask, and, continually looking at it, because, you're going to get feedback that they didn't like this answer, this wasn't quite right. You're also going to have to continue to update it because you're going to have new things, as it evolves that people need to ask about. But certainly it can, we've seen many, all of us, right? Personally, you go somewhere, you could have a chatbot. You may think it's a human you're chatting with. It could be a chatbot. So we all see it in our daily lives, and it can be very effective if done right, and you have to continually update it and evolve. But, that's a good thing, right? Because then we can leave the tougher questions maybe to humans, because as I said, we're augmenting humans. We're not replacing them. We're really trying to augment what they can do by helping up front.
Yeah. Perfect. And so with that, going to ask for a concluding thought from Patrice and Neeraj. But before I do that and leave you with their final words of wisdom, just want to remind everybody that if you have any feedback on the webinar and any recommendations for future webinars, there will be a short survey right at the end here that should flash up onto your screen. Also, remember that there is going to be an exclusive 10% discount to the upcoming InsurTech Rising Europe event in September. So you'll see that discount on your screen shortly, and we'll also send you an email with this code over the next day or so. So with that housekeeping out of the way, Patrice, would you mind leaving our listeners with one key takeaway from today's webinar?
So I'll say, as we said earlier, AI is a journey. You're going to learn to grow and evolve. Don't think of it as replacing humans. And start small so you can learn and grow, because there's tremendous benefits from AI. So go ahead and take advantage of them.
Perfect. And Neeraj, if you wouldn't mind having the final word in terms of a key takeaway from today's session.
Yeah, I mean, my one thing would be that don't think of yourself as a hammer and that everything is a nail. Start with the problem. Don't start with the solution. And as Patrice said, don't be afraid to fail. That if you are not failing, you haven't tried hard enough.
Yeah, that's a perfect thing to end on. So that's all of the time that we have for today, I'm afraid. So I'd like to thank the panel for joining me and sharing their fantastic insights, as well as everyone who tuned in this afternoon or this morning, depending where you are around the world. We look forward to hearing more about these trends develop in the meantime from really all of us here on the panel. So, yeah, that's it. So thank you. We really enjoyed bringing you this webinar. If you want to read more thought, leadership, and research on the topics, keep a lookout on the InsurTech Rising community page for the recording of this webinar, as well as all the webinars, articles, and interviews. So thank you, everybody, and goodbye.